Good morning once again, and may I welcome on behalf of the Public Accounts Enterprises Committee all the officials from the Ministry of Finance, Investments Division, the Ministry of Education, the National Training Agency, members of the media, and members of the public. My name is Wade Mark, and I'm the chairman of the Public Accounts Enterprises Committee. May I, from the outset, indicate that this meeting is being held in public and is being broadcast on the Parliament's Channel 11 and Radio 105.5 FM, and the Parliament's YouTube channel, ParlView. The purpose of our meeting, or this meeting, of the Public Accounts Enterprises Committee is to continue the examination of the audited accounts, balance sheets, and other financial statements of the National Training Agency for the period 2008 to 2011. The committee, that is the PAEC, is desirous of hearing the challenges being faced by the key stakeholders at the NTA in an attempt to determine some of the possible solutions to these challenges. The role of our committee is to help the NTA improve its delivery of services in an efficient, effective, and economic manner. I will now ask the officials from the Ministry of Finance to introduce themselves, followed by the Ministry of Education and the Training Agency, that is the National Training Agency. And subsequent to that, I'll ask our colleagues who are members of our committee to follow suit. So can I ask the officials from the Investments Division to please introduce themselves?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Yvette Bab. I'm the Acting Director of Social and Economic Transformation, Investment Division, Ministry of Finance.
Good morning all. Inshan Mohammed, Senior Audit Analyst, Investment Division, Ministry of Finance.
Good morning all. I am Malam Mohammed, Senior Business Analyst, Investments Division.
Good morning. I'm Angela Siniswi-Jeve, Acting Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Education.
Good morning. Lata Tapsi Jahur, Acting Director of Finance and Accounts, Ministry of Education.
Hi, good morning. Anis Rahman, Corporate Legal Secretary, National Training Agency.
Good morning all. Martha Prince, Acting Senior Internal Auditor.
Good morning. Ruby Alain, Chairman, National Training Agency.
Good morning. Steve Aman, Chief Executive Officer of the National Training Agency.
Good morning. Anthony Singh, Senior Manager Finance and Corporate Services, the National Training Agency.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Pauline Whiteman, Senior Manager, Program Development and Management, National Training Agency.
Good morning, all. Brian Bissessa, Senior Manager, Human Resources, National Training Agency.
Well, thank you all, and I'll now ask my colleagues on my far left to introduce themselves.
Thank you kindly, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everyone. Jennifer Baptiste Reimers, a member of this committee.
I think You just have to press your...
Sorry, for the record, Fitzgerald Hines, member.
Good morning, Foster Cummings, member.
Good morning. Nian Gasudoli, member.
Good morning, everyone. David Small, member.
Thank you all. At this point, I'll call on the chairman of the NTA to make a brief opening statement and to be followed by the chief executive officer of the NTA to also make a brief opening statement. I now invite the chairman of the NTA.
Thank you, Chair. And once again, good morning to you, to members of the committee, to all present. We would like to thank the committee for the opportunity to appear here again, this time to closely examine the operations of the National Training Agency with a view to taking action to address some of the shortcomings that were identified, and certainly to appropriately address any deficiencies in the organization. We also want to put on record that since we last appeared, we have begun work on the development of a new strategic plan. That began on the 16th of February. And after careful consideration, the board has taken a decision to attempt to redefine the mandate, the original mandate of the NTA, in the context of some of the developments since then. We're looking at the importance of the mandate of the NTA. We believe it is still relevant, and we believe that given the growth of the sector since the establishment of the NTA, some of the responsibilities given to it with respect to the coordination and rationalization of the disparate elements of the tertiary education sector are even more vital and important at this point in time. So our focus will be on redefining the original mandate, looking at improving the efficiency of the sector, generally aiming to improve quality and relevance of technical and vocational education and training in Trinidad and Tobago, and doing those things in the context of the CARICOM HRD strategy for 2030, which talks about unlocking Caribbean human potential. And so we bear in mind that the history of the NTA has demonstrated some success in some areas, but there is certainly a need to refocus and to re-energize the organization to achieve the original mandate. We're happy to have our full team here today, including our Chief Executive Officer, and we have provided the information that was requested by the committee on our last appearance. So we are here to answer all of your questions and concerns.
Thank you so very much. I'll now invite Mr. Steve Armand, the Chief Executive Officer, to make brief remarks.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me just start by saying a pleasant good morning to all of the honorable members of the committee and all of the distinguished ladies and gentlemen who is also in the chamber. A pleasant good morning also to the listening and viewing public, which would include members of the staff of the NTA, and I'm sure family members of those who are present here today. I wish first to express my gratitude for the honor and privilege afforded to myself and the members of my team to represent the National Training Agency as we discuss the people's business as it relates to the work and the contribution of the National Training Agency. Permit me also, honorable members, to express my sincere apology for being unable to attend the previous sitting, which was held on January 24th, 2018, due to illness. Kindly allow me also to express my hope that our attendance here today and our answers as it relates to your questions and concerns will present a true picture of the work of the NTA and the significant contribution the company has made to our country in the area of TVET. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me this short introduction, and I now defer to your direction.
Thank you so very much. May I commence the inquiry by addressing a couple of questions to the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Education. Madam Permanent Secretary, in your oversight role as it relates to the NTA, could you share with this committee how does the ministry proceed in its monitoring and overall evaluation of the operations of this agency, particularly when it would have submitted its annual business plan? And may you at this time also advise us whether you are in receipt or you have been in receipt of any submission from this agency of annual business plans, which is part of that agency's responsibility.
Good morning again. First, I'd like to explain that we have a division in the Ministry of Education, the research, RPTS, Research, Technical and Research Planning and Technical Services Division, who has responsibility for oversight of the agencies under the purview of the Ministry of Education. Over the years, we would admit that we have not been able to monitor as closely as we would like, because we have probably one officer trying to do this for the 10 or so agencies that they fall under this ministry. However, we have put systems in place more recently where all the agencies were written to, reminded of their responsibilities towards the ministry, the line ministry, which is the Ministry of Education, as well as their responsibility to the Ministry of Finance Investments Division. And we have been following up with reminding them verbally and in writing on their responsibilities. I cannot say at this point in time that whether we have received a business plan from the NTA for this period. In my research, I know the NTA has not really been submitting as they are required to certain documents. And that is why we put system in place this financial year to remind them. I cannot say that I've seen a business plan for NTA for this year.
Can you indicate whether there have been any business plans submitted earlier than this year?
Not to my recollection, sir.
You said that the unit, is it the research planning?
Research planning and technical services.
And technical services. Now, you did indicate that that particular unit is deficient in many respects, particularly in respect of your human resource requirements. Could you indicate that given the interest or renewed interest in carrying out your oversight responsibility, what measures have you put in place to monitor, effectively monitor and evaluate the activities of this particular entity?
We have in that division established positions, which of course we have to wait on the Public Service Commission to fill. Those requests will be going annually where we ask to fill vacancies in our division. In the meantime, we have 3 BO, business operations assistants. One is a 2 and the other 2 are 1s who have been assigned to different agencies under the ministry purview to treat with monitoring those agencies.
Could you share with us how many warm bodies with the appropriate skill sets would be required to effectively monitor and evaluate those agencies that fall under you, inclusive of the NTA, and what is the current complement at this material time?
Right now we have 1 operational research officer, 2 I believe, and as I said, the 3 1 BOA2 and 2 BOA1. And we believe if we can get them on, the BOAs, get them on continuously, we should be able to manage, because, as I said, we have about 12, I might be off of that figure, agencies to monitor. And since we have put the system in place in October, we've really been trying to assign to these individuals certain agencies, and they will be able to monitor them more closely. We have also involved our Director of Finance and Accounts to go through the financial statements, because the persons in our Research Planning and Technical Services Division would be more planning officers, that kind of thing, and more into business plans, administrative reports, those kind of documents. And our director will look at the financial aspects of the agencies.
Do you have an organizational structure as it relates to this that would identify what are your needs based on an objective analysis of your direction as a ministry remonitoring agencies under your purview?
We haven't finalized that as yet. It's that we are trying with the BOAs, and we think really if they're on contract. So if we can get them on contract continuously, well, on a proper contract for 3 years, plus the public officer, that we should be able to manage. But I don't have a chart with me.
So are you giving this committee the undertaking that if we were to call you back at the NTA within 8 months from today's date, you would be in a position to provide us with a more effective position as it relates to the monitoring and evaluation of this agency 8 months from today's date?
We should be able to, sir.
All right. The other area I wanted you to share with us is this. You know, revenue is very tight in our country. And in an attempt to reduce costs and to monitor this agency effectively, will there be any discussions with this agency to seek to have it relocated to your spacious premises and location on St. Vincent Street? Would you be able to indicate to this committee whether, in an effort to reduce costs, whether that is an option that you would be prepared to look at?
At this point in time, Chair, the towers, which comprise two towers actually, which was built for one Ministry of Education, houses what was 2 ministries, which is Ministry of Education plus Ministry of the former Tertiary Education. So we have more persons in that building than the building was catered for in the first place. Since we have been in that building in 2016, we have brought into the building other divisions of the ministry who were in rental premises. So right now we have over 750 persons in one tower and 176 or so in Tower B, which deals specifically with our accounting units. We also have UNESCO in the building, and we have had to bring in NIHA's operations that were in St. Clair. So at this point in time, we may have floor space, but we don't have workstations. And we have a request that came in last week from NIHA's to house their 60 members from their head office, which is situated right now in St. Augustine. So until we deal with that request, I am not in a position to say whether we can look at housing NTA at this time.
And my final question before my colleagues intervene. In an effort to reduce expenditure across the board, particularly in state enterprises, under your purview, you indicated that the Accounts Department reviews monthly statement of expenditure. Could you share with us what were some of the challenges and issues that were observed while reviewing statements, and how have these challenges been addressed, particularly, and we are addressing the NTA at this time because we are not dealing with other agencies. So could you tell us, based on those reviews, what are some of the challenges, some of the issues that were observed by the Accounts Department of the Ministry of Education, and how have these challenges been addressed?
I need to clarify that we have only received financial statements from NTA for this financial year, October, November, and December. We received those in January or very early February. Our perusal of it has resulted in our plan to write to the NTA, because one of the major things we discovered is that they have been, for those months in question, functioning over $600,000 expended. They are in over $600,000 in expenditure than the income that they're getting. So our first plan is to write them and question how have they been managing if you are running with over $600,000 deficit for 3 months running. We had not been getting statements prior to that. So this is our start. Ms. Tapsi Jahu only joined us on the 30th of January. So as a new director, she has been given these statements, and we are going to sit together to work out what other concerns that she would have noticed, and we will put it in writing to get an explanation from the agency. We have also, upon receipt of those financial statements, we have indicated to the Budgets Division of the Ministry of Finance how NTA has been expending public funds. That document went, 2 days ago? Yesterday, sorry. And I guess we will also have further discussions with the Budget Division to see what other concerns that might be raised. But that is how we plan to go. When we get the statements, go through them, and write to the NTA to raise our concerns.
And those statements were for?
October, November, December 2017.
And there was no other previous statements?
We had not, no. We have not been in receipt of statements regularly.
All right, well, I'll pause at this time and invite my colleagues to intervene. I'll come back in. Mr. Hines on the floor. Just press.
It is particularly good to have you here today, given as you would have been seeing on the television when we were last here. Were you looking at us on television?
I was, sir.
Yes. You were not sufficiently ill to not understand what we were dealing with. You were good enough to understand.
I was good enough to understand.
Yeah. This company can be described based on all that you heard and what the data that you provided us. We have come to the conclusion that this agency has become a runaway horse. There's precious little good to be said in your responses about it, as a very general comment. I've just heard the Permanent Secretary speak about accountability and, more than anything else, what is proposed to be done in the future. In a very practical sense, how did you account for your work as the Chief Executive Officer for the period you have been in office? Because, just let me say a little backdrop to that. Of course, you are accountable to the board, to the Permanent Secretary, in the sense of the subventions and accountability for it. Of course, you are guided by the performance manual, Ministry of Finance, and your internal audit manual and so on. But I want an honest answer, because this is public business. And we have all the records in front of us. But I'm asking in generality, in a practical sense, how did you account for what was happening in this company? And I ask that, as I conclude this question, against the background of what seems to be the total absence of accountability for a sustained period. Tell us, in a practical sense, were you really accounting to to the board, to the PS, to anyone? Were you following those manuals? And I say you, I mean the NTA, led by you. Please.
Honorable Member, there are as you indicated, there are several levels of accounting that the NTA would have to prescribe to. In the internal space, management accounts to the board, and that is done either through the subcommittees of the board or, particularly at the monthly board meetings, with a report that would normally come from my office. In that report, there's normally a treatment of what the company would have done over the period of the preceding month, particularly in terms of what we would have achieved, and those achievements is normally in a sustained alignment with what we would have set out as our company work plan for the fiscal period. In those reports, we also provide to the board updates, what we call financial reporting, and there are other issues that we would bring to the board that we believe is either in response to directions from the board or issues that we believe that the board needs to be aware of and where we require the board to assist. External to that, we report specifically to our line ministry and to the Ministry of Finance. And to my knowledge, every request for information to date, particularly during my time, that information has been provided. There was one particular circumstance, though, when the Ministry of Finance would have written us, and it was a letter that was sent out to all state agencies, indicating that they wanted, there was a list of about 23 submissions. And in that 23 submissions, the prescription for those submissions would have been either on an annual basis, a quarterly basis, or a mid-year basis. And in my review of it, I discovered that in the history of the NTA, there was some of those submissions that were never made, but it was also because the request never came directly to the agency. You would have the list of that, right? Yes, yes.
Together between 2012 and today's date, by way of subventions, the NTA would have received some $285.2 million. So this is no small operation, particularly in these economic circumstances. And while I accept that the management of your agency is as diffuse and there are different tiers as you have described it, as we understand it, it is all about the NTA. And you, as the chief executive officer, would have been accounted to. In other words, the HR person, the accountant person, the audited person, auditors inside of the NTA were accounting to you. The records reveal that you were not taking good stock. How long have you been in post? Just for the public consumption now.
Approximately 3.5 years.
And you were part of the organization before that?
No, sir.
Or you came in?
I joined the company at
you came in at the very
July
top?
2014.
Yes.
I did, yes.
Yes. The records reveal that under your watch, things have really, really been bad and reflecting no accountability or you not enforcing that accountability as head of the organization. Are you prepared to accept that, or do you want me to get into some details?
Are you referring to the audit reports?
All of it, every single thing.
Yeah. Through the chair, may I respond to what you're saying?
To my question.
One of the peculiarities of what's before you there is that the audit reports that would have been generated, some of those reports would have been generated as early as 2012, which is when the audit department was configured in the organization. And it would have comprised of some findings from external auditors at the time, as well as audit findings from the internal audit team that was set up. When I joined the company, I inherited a situation that required a significant amount of energy to correct. There were audits that was done pretty much across the company. one of the peculiarities that I'm referring to is that in this particular agency, I have 13 reports to me. In most agencies, Honorable Member, you would agree that most CEOs have, on average, 4 to 5 reports. So the span of the organization at the management level was pretty wide. The audits...
But let me just intervene to say that's not an issue. You took the job knowing that.
Well, I'm explaining...
I'm just saying in response to you, that's not a problem.
Right, and I'm just bringing
the job knowing that.
Yes, and I'm bringing the context.
And you consider that you were sufficiently well paid because you kept the job.
Yes, that's not an issue.
Okay, so that's not an issue. Please, proceed.
Right, so in terms of the context of what would have been the total amount of audit recommendations that would have been brought forward, really, those recommendations would have come to my desk sometime in, I would say, mid-2015, which there was a time after I joined the company for several months when there was no senior internal auditor. There was the 3 audit members that exist now that would have been reporting to the audit committee at the time. The audit team was not even situated at the head office. They were situated in a location several miles away. And there was a degree of dissonance between the audit and the management at the time.
All right, I take that. Just hold on. Right, I take that. But once it came, notwithstanding all of those rough seas,
yes.
Once it came to your attention in mid-2015, tell us what did you do?
Right. So it required a new management process in terms of tracking the recommendations and then reviewing the operations of the company with a view to close off those audit recommendations. Now, what I want the committee to appreciate is that what was inherited was situations that required fixing from as early as the beginning of the company. So to close off some of those issues, the managers at the time had to go all the way back into the history of the company, some 18 years ago, to close off some of these conditions. Now, if you look at the span of the departments, fundamentally, all of the managers responded to the recommendations and would have completed what was required to close off those findings. Save and except the HR department, where things would have proliferated from what I believe longer than it should have. Now, what I would want the members to appreciate is while we were looking at these internal efficiencies,
yes,
there was also a need to propel the company outwards. I came in at a time when we were on the cusp of a very challenging period that's experienced by all today. So immediately in 2014, 2015, there was a huge reinvention of how we operated to reduce our expenditure. So, Honorable Member, you would see when you look at the financials that prior to 2014, 2012, 2013, 2012, 2011, the subventions at the time were around $50 million plus. And the expenditure of the company was pretty much in line with that $50 million plus. Moving the organization from that expenditure level, you would see that from the time I came in and I started to work with the management team, we were able to reduce the expenditure to about $44 million. Then it went down to about $43 million, which included a back pay and a 9% raise in pay for basically the majority of the staff. And the subsequent year, that figure came down to $34 million. So in 3 years, permit me please, Honorable Member,
yes.
I'm trying to bring it into context because while we were treating with the internal operational efficiencies as part of being able to reduce our operational expenditure, in 3 years' time, Honorable Members, the company was able to reduce expenditure from around, what was it, 50? Yeah, about just over $50 million to $34 million annually. And that's, you're talking about a $16 million.
Before I give way to my colleagues, who I am sure hold burning questions.
Of course.
With consternation for you. For the benefit of the public, let me rehearse some facts. very quickly.
Yes.
In 2012, the subvention was $18.1 million. That's 2012. In 2013, it became $53.4 million.
Excuse, Honorable, can we just correct the figure?
You can correct.
Is that okay?
Well, correct it. You tell me.
Honorable Member,
Yes.
the subvention received for 2011-12 was a total of 38,100,000.
And for 2013, 12-13?
Honorable Member, for 2013, it would have been 53,400.
Good.
As you indicated.
2014, 52.5. Correct? 2015, 54 million. 2016, 52. 2017, 28, and 2018, 27, or thereabout. Now, you telling us that you took action to reduce the expenditure during those years, but the records show us that we had no financial statements submitted to us, not even statements, audited statements, for the entirety of that period. You agree with that? I'm talking about you. You are here.
Saying that the audited financial statements...
But you will agree with me that under your watch, we had not had the benefit of your issue of financial statements as the law and the Parliament requires. You agree with that?
I agree.
Good.
But there's a context to that as well, Honorable Sir.
I'm not so interested in the context. I'm interested in the facts. Because it was your job to deal with these matters, you having held the office. Now, insofar, and you talk about reducing expenditure, but just let me give you a slight synopsis of what your internal auditors were signaling to you for the entirety of your sitting in that chair. And I'm tempted to ask for your salary, you know, but we have the record. I won't ask what it is for at this point, but you were well paid. And by the way, one of my colleagues may very well point out, well-traveled too. And I'm saying this because when, you know, I'll come to that later. Your internal auditors in respect of procurement said to you that there was an absence of approved vendor listing in terms of procurement. There was a lack of adequate and appropriate source documents. There was an inadequate security of the company's checks. The standard operating procedures to the extent that they existed, lacked controls. In respect of receivables, your internal accounts, your internal auditors told you no accounts receivable reconciliations prepared for a sustained period, lack of adequate and appropriate source documents. In terms of payables, no accounts payable reconciliation prepared, poor maintenance of payable ledgers. All of these things, the finance and facilities departments are in breach of policy number 415-2, procedure for overtime, not justifying requests for overtime. A whole host of situations which in themselves leads to mismanagement and corruption. And these went on for a sustained period, and those remain the facts as we speak today. That's what I'm dealing with. That's what I'm dealing with. Let me hear
Honorable Member, I'd like the finance.
No,
senior finance
I'll come to him. I want you as the CEO to tell me, in the state, the state of affairs, given this kind of report.
Right, and again, that is a situation that...
Because it is in your power. Right. If you felt that the senior manager, who you now directed me to, it was within your power to recommend his termination.
No,
as again, part of your accountability.
This was a situation that we inherited. The Senior Finance Manager Manager of Finance and Corporate Services, joined the company in late 2015. And what you see in those audit reports fundamentally have been closed to date. So again, Honorable Member, these were things that I met in the organization, signaled to me by the audit team, and then corrective measures taken immediately over a sustained period of time to bring almost, I think we are down to maybe less than 10% of the findings to total closure. And half of those are really for the remit of the board, for there to be a proper closure. But to date, we are close to 100% of effective closures for those findings. And again, those findings did not happen during my term. These were things that we inherited, and these are things that we solved. And in solving them, honorable members, a huge part of that solution, and this is why it was so important to work with audit, to understand where the deficiencies were. These are the things that allowed us to be able to bring down our expenditure from 50 million plus to 34 million, and still not let it affect our output. And I'd like the honorable members to understand that
okay,
we have been able to...
Just before I give way to one of my colleagues, let me just ask the chairman one final question in this set. Madam Chairman, you've heard my questions. You have heard the responses of your Chief Executive Officer. Are you satisfied that these matters have been rectified in the manner he is now submitting to this committee as we speak?
We met yesterday as a board and we were not satisfied. I can ask the senior internal auditor.
That's all right.
To
I
give
just
an update on
content
that.
myself with your answer for the time being. You are not so satisfied. Thank you very kindly.
I'll turn to Mrs. David Small, then we go to Mrs. Jennifer Baptiste-Primus, and then first.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate the opportunity. Good morning again to everyone. Chair, if you permit me, this inquiry is troubling. I believe that what we're looking at is a complete crisis in governance here, and I continue to be very, very perturbed. And where we should have structures at the Ministry of Education to manage this, or to rein things in, and the investments divisions. Probably, I'm not sure what the reasons are, but these things require perhaps a fix that's above us, but we need to flag it. There's a crisis of governance. And if you allow systems to go, they will tend to go probably in a negative direction. Now, I'm very thankful for the chairman's response. I want to go directly to the CEO. Thank you for being here. I know today is going to be a tough day. I want to ask you, in your time there, at the last hearing, you said you looked at it on TV. We looked at the accounts of NTA, and when we looked at the amount of money coming in, around 80% of the money coming in was to deal with admin expenses, operations of the business. Payroll and car rentals and electricity and whatever. How is it possible that what is the work of NTA? Because I am struggling as a business person to understand if we make $100 and we have to spend $80 to just keep the office open, how does $20 get us to do the work?
Right.
And when I try to find the outputs of the National Training Agency. Unfortunately, I may have been looking in the wrong place, but I have not been able to find them.
Okay.
And so I want to ask you, as the CEO,
yes,
how well or not has the NTA delivered on what it's supposed to deliver on?
Okay. Let me first. Can I start first with the ratio that you're pulling out there? If you look historically at the company, that ratio has pretty much been sustained, and regardless of the life cycle of the company, what you found was that between 65 to 80% would have been in payroll and expenses and so on. The work of the NTA is fundamentally produced out of the sweat equity of the individuals, the employees themselves. So there are very little input. It's a service-based organization, honorable member, and really the work that we produce is done directly by the employees themselves. We work with basically two levels of stakeholders. We have a workforce management system that we use to basically to create an impact with employers and the employer base of the country. And then we have a quality assurance system together with a certification system that we use to interplay with the education sectors of the economy. Now, just if you permit me just a couple of minutes, I can give you just in a nutshell what the NTA is all about. We are an enabling agency, so a lot of the output that we produce is produced through the relationships that we hold with stakeholders. A lot of the work that we do with stakeholders are generated internally. So some of the special skills that we have, you can't go to any agency and learn those skills. A lot of what we develop inside is sustained over the years, and employees come in and they're normally trained in that particular skill area. But we work in the space of what we call the known knowns, the known unknowns, and the unknown unknowns, and I'll explain that. The known knowns in education speaks to things like access to education, the quality of delivery of education, the graduation rate, and of course the most important factor, the graduation into jobs. The NTA has a part in all of those areas. And so, for instance, from an access point of view, we assist in terms of the seamless movement of people into the education system. From a quality perspective, we work with training institutions through our quality management system to provide qualifications that are based on something called CBET, which is a competency-based education and training system, so that our certifications and our assessment is pretty much in line with a person's ability to perform the particular job for which they have been
Mr. Arman, I have to interject. I have been, I think, be very generous in trying to allow you to demonstrate to this committee in English that we could understand what it is the NTA does and what is delivered. I've heard you. Right. I'm not convinced, right, so, and I want to stop you there. We have other things we need to ask. Okay. I think that what you've gone through there is literally painful to hear. I am being, unfortunately, this is a serious committee here, and I tend to not put too much fluff on my responses. I put no sugar on it. That was painful to hear, because what I wanted to hear, but here's what I would have liked to hear. Sure. The NTA is involved in a series of engagement activities. Here's what we do. We have several certificates and letters from the people who we work with who certify that we've done quality work. I didn't hear that, because everything can be measured. And if it can't be measured, I'm going to give you the please, Mr. Arman, please, Mr. Arman, allow me. If it can't be measured, you are the CEO. And if you can't give me a concise response on that, then I have a challenge. And I want to stop there on that line. I'm not asking for any more response. I have other questions. Forgive me, Mr. Chairman, can I have another question? Thank you. Mr. Arman, and some of my colleagues will tackle this. I have looked at the historical operations of this company, and I've looked at the staff numbers, and I've looked at and I'm building up to some. I've looked at the separation between management and administrative and support staff. And then I marry that to the schedule of overseas travel. I am looking at it and I'm seeing that perhaps in certainly some of the years we have 40 to 50% of the managers going on overseas travel. Now, I am not sure what is the value being brought to the organization from this. When you look at the people, and there's some stellar travelers, people are traveling 8 and 10 times a year in an entity that is on the public purse, and for which the outputs are not, you have not been able to delineate the outputs in a logical, simpler way that we could understand. So something is wrong. Something is wrong with the system. What we are missing, and I'm through the chair, I would like to ask, because what was provided to us was only after a particular period, we would like to have the updated set of all the overseas travel of all of the staff. What was provided is shocking. Because some of the years here, you have probably 50% of the staff traveling overseas at all sorts of things, and they may be valid. But I think that as a CEO, you understand you have a problem with costs. So when you want to go to London, you have 6 people going to London at $60,000 each. I think there's a cost that somebody could look at and say, perhaps that's a bit excessive. That is excessive. Somebody had to look at it and say, hey, this doesn't look right. So that I'm not blaming you. I'm saying these are things that have happened. And this committee would like to see in some way in which that stops. Somebody puts a control on it. So I want to get from you, and I laid my context. You have identified that you are working to reduce costs and try to bring the company to some shape. You've sustained a particular percentage in terms of how much of your subvention goes to making the company just breathe. In terms of, and then on top of that, you have other things where people are traveling. What I'm trying to get at, when do people, in between all of the other things, all the engagement that you say they're doing, and then in between all of the various overseas travel, when does the work get done? When does the work get done? Yeah, please.
Well, we looked at the period under review, and the foreign travel was something that we looked at closely. And what we would have picked up from that honourable member is that a lot of the travel that would have been done by members at the time were travel particularly related to the development of the regional system, because that is where you saw the most amount of development in terms of the Canter arrangement. A lot of the movement of staff to and from those meetings would have been done either to develop capacity or to assist sister territories within CARICOM in developing capacity as well. Up until the late 2000, say around 2008 thereabouts, you would find that only 3 territories had really made significant gain in TVET, and that would have been Trinidad and Tobago, Barbados, and Jamaica. So these 3 territories were fundamentally given the responsibility to support the development of the sister territories in Canter and as part of the responsibility through CARICOM. So when we looked at it, it was either through capacity building for staff themselves within the system, or to assist in capacity building for other territories.
Thank you, Mr. Ahmad. Mr. Ahmad, I want to stop you there because I know we have a time constraint. I understand what you're saying. A lot of this training also capacity building. I get
we had one last very important point.
Yeah.
A lot of the travel, even though you would have seen that the cost on it, a lot of that travel was actually subsidized. So development agencies would have reimbursed.
And Mr. Ahmad, you've missed my question, because in between all of the other things and all of this travel, when is the work getting done? So I have one more question for Mr. Chairman before I give way. I want to ask Mr. Ahmad, you are the Chief Executive Officer. You, as was asked by my good colleague about it, you understand your role as the head of the organization, and that governance, you respond to a board of directors.
Yes.
I cannot see someone as a chief executive officer fulfilling that role in any meaningful way, not making sure that the accounts for the monies that have been allocated. There's no excuse for that from where I sit. There's no excuse. There's no way, if you miss 1 year perhaps, or if you miss 2 years, but not, we're into 4 years now that you've been there, going on for that, and no annual accounts. And then I want to flag, again, the audit report is replete, and I want to thank the internal auditor for providing this report, because this report is damning. It speaks to a complete breakdown in systems, processes, and governance. Things have gone awry, and it's under your watch, and I am unconvinced on the responses. So I just want to flag, like my good colleague here, one issue. What would permit the NTA in 2015 to purchase 350 Kindles?
That would have been
forgive me for the members. A Kindle is a e-reading device. We can you read electronic books on it.
Yeah.
What would be the decision?
That was the Christmas present at the time given to staff members.
You had 350 staff?
At that time there was also the on-the-job training program staff. So the
and because
the staff complement of the company was in excess of, it was around 350. Yes.
And because here's what the interesting thing about the internal auditor here. Yeah. There's no distribution list for the Kindles. So the company purchased 350 Kindles to give as a Christmas gift from the public purse. From the public purse. So you purchase electronic reading devices. Most parents in this country, in this room, would have to purchase those things by themselves. But you, as the CEO, would have overseen that. Am I correct?
That was a decision.
And of course, you didn't provide the company accounts for that. So this is where I am going, Mr. Chairman, that the whole thing has broken down. If you, as a CEO, can see that that decision was madly flawed in the context that you are receiving taxpayers' money. People are earning and working very hard for their money. Taxes coming out of their money automatically. It is being given to you as a steward, and you're buying Kindles for the staff. And then, according to the auditor, there's no distribution list, so we don't know who actually got these Kindles. On that note, Mr. Chairman, I will stop my first pass of questions. I have several more questions, but I will give the floor to other members. Mr. Chairman, thank you for allowing me to get in here.
There was a distribution list. I think they recorded it.
Mr. CEO.
Sir.
You just spoke about capacity building and CVET in the region and so on. But a lot of the travel had to do with Germany and London and Mexico and so on. And that strikes me too. The question I want, not the question, the request I want, sorry. Even this electronic device seems to be having a problem with the Kindles. The request I wanted to make, since there's no record of how those Kindles were distributed, that they be provided forthwith to this committee. Since you spent that money on 350 reading devices as gifts for staff, we would like to see in great detail to whom, when, and how they were distributed. Do we have that commitment?
As best as we can provide it, sir.
And do we have a commitment we should have that in 2 days, since you have it there at the office?
Well, I think what the auditor had flagged was that it wasn't that there wasn't a distribution list, because the Kindles were distributed to staff.
We just want to see how they were distributed.
Yeah.
And to whom?
I think what happened was that the record of the list is...
And as well, we would like to see the procurement of them, the procedure for its procurement, for their procurement.
Yes, yes.
And the cost.
Yes.
And how they were distributed. Let the taxpayers of this country see how their money was spent. Could we get that in 48 hours?
I think we can provide that.
We thank you and look forward to that.
All right, Mrs. Jennifer Baptiste-Primus.
Thank you kindly, Mr. Chairman. Before I go into the questions that I have to ask Mr. Arman, when you purchased those 350 Kindles, what was the staff population at the NTA?
Brian, please note the OGT as well. The members, both staffs. Sorry? That was close to 350. The HR manager is saying it would have been close to 350. So, including the staff of the OGT at the time. So, I know that a quantity would have been purchased in excess of the staff count, because it was customary to also provide gifts to stakeholders as well as other institutions within the education sector. So, but the staff count, as he's explaining, was close to 350.
And when was that, Mr. Arman?
That would have been in December of 2014, Honorable Member. It would have been part of an exercise. That year, the company celebrated 15 years, and it would have had also its 15-year annual celebration. Not annual celebration, it's 15-year celebration.
Well, I have, like other members of this committee, have formed a particular impression. But before I get to that, Mr. Ammon, on the last occasion when you were absent and this committee met the NTA, Mr. Bissessor informed this committee that via a communication, a written communication, you had appointed him to act for you. Is that correct? Yes. Were you authorized to take such a decision?
At the time, I believed I had that authorization. It seemed that it was both a simple as well as a serious miscommunication between the chairperson and myself.
Well, I will not buy that, Mr. Ammon, because you see, we have a copy of the letter that you read, that you wrote.
Yes.
And clearly, such a decision a CEO cannot take. If you as the CEO want to tell this committee that that was a miscommunication, something is dreadfully wrong. I would just like to ask, are you in the habit of usurping the authority of your board?
I have never once done so, Honorable Member.
Appointing Mr. Bissessor, from my experience on how a board operates and how a CEO operates,
yeah, and that
was usurping the authority of the board.
Chairman, would you?
Mr. Ammon, you are not directing the session. We are.
Of course.
I am asking you a question. I have questions to ask the chair.
Yeah.
But I am asking you a question. You are the CEO.
Yes.
You were not here on the last occasion.
Yes.
You appointed Mr. Bissessor to act for you.
Yeah, that was...
and to answer questions that this committee may have had for you that he would have been in a position to answer.
Yes,
to my mind and my experience, that was usurping the authority of the board. During the period 2014 to 2017, I would like to ask a few questions. How many trips did you take out of the country?
Well, listen, we don't want you to think. We would want accurate information.
Yes, if I could provide that.
What I would like to suggest, you cannot mislead this committee.
Of course.
So if you don't have the facts, please submit the facts in writing.
Yes.
So that you wouldn't be accused of misleading this committee.
Sure.
We need to have the facts.
Yes.
But you can give an estimation followed up by
the facts.
Writing to us. So could you respond to the Honourable Member?
Honourable Member, I think it's about 10. I'm not absolutely sure, but I will provide the information in writing.
Thank you very much. And during those approximately 10 trips, did anyone act for you in the organization?
Just one time. And that would have been Miss Pauline Whiteman.
And what would have obtained, you being the CEO, leaving Trinidad and Tobago, leaving the organization leaderless, what would have obtained?
Well, what I would normally have done I would normally leave 3 of the managers as a team to look after the operations of the company, and we would communicate such with the ministry and so on.
What was the role of your board in all this? You did that. You did that as the CEO. What was the direction?
Right.
Did the board give direction under those circumstances?
Well, normally the decisions would have been taken in consultation with the chairman at the time, Honourable Member. And because the times that I would have been out would have been short periods, what I would normally do, and these would be for conferences or meetings with Cantor and so on, normally, I we would have used the technology that was available to us. So before the meeting,
Mr.
at breaks,
Hammond,
lunch,
you are missing my point completely. I'm not talking about communicating with your team.
Yes.
I am referring to you as the CEO being out of the country, thereby no one was leading the organization during those times.
There was a team that would have been left to look after the major issues should anything have arisen at the time.
Is that how organizations function, to your understanding, Mr. Hammond?
Sometimes.
Which organizations operate like that?
Well, I know that it's not always an absolute that you leave someone to act.
You say organizations function like that. Which organizations you know?
Well, I can't refer to any institutions locally. I won't know what obtains in, for instance.
Because a good governance model requires someone to always be at the helm of an organization, Mr. Hammond. And if you are leaving the country, and I trust, Madam Chair, that such situations will not occur under your watch. Mr. Hammond, I want to move on. What is the operating cost of the organization to date?
It's about $34 million annually, Honourable Member.
And what is your annual subvention?
The allocation for this fiscal period is estimated to be $27 million.
So you are operating with a deficit between $9 to $11 million?
About 7, or thereabouts.
How are you going to address that operating deficit?
We have been addressing that deficit for the last fiscal period and this fiscal period we have residual bank balances that we have been drawing from.
Mr. Hammond, you're telling this committee that you are running the organization on a deficit and you are utilizing your cash in bank to run the organization?
Yes. We have approximately $46 million in the bank, Honourable Member.
So
when we would have met with our line ministry, the Honourable Minister, a meeting was held with all agencies under his remit. And agencies expressed the challenges that they would face with the deficit. In particular, the NTA and MIC, he would have indicated that we treat with the deficit, given the fact that we had reserves. But at the same time...
Please stop, Mr. Hammond, because you are giving the assumption that you would have had ministerial approval. I didn't say that you said it. You are giving the assumption that you would have had ministerial approval to utilize your bank balances. Is that how you intend to address the deficit, by the utilization of your cash in bank? What happens when your cash in bank runs out? How are you going to address the deficit?
Right, and that is something that we started to look at approximately 2 years ago, Honourable Member. We would have treated with the deficit basically by looking at what we did on 3 conceptual frameworks. Minimizing costs as best as we could, increasing impact with stakeholders, and at the same time, reconfiguring what we were doing to start earning our revenue for the first time, because our company has been subvention-based from its inception. So the only way to really treat with those deficits within the period of time that we have the reserves is to change the business model to the point where we can start earning a revenue to address that deficit.
Mr. Hammond, I can speak for myself. I am totally dissatisfied with what the information flow from your good self. Based on what you have said, there is no clearly thought out plan to take the organization out of the deficit it is into a healthier position. Mr. Hammond, I want to, with regards to the agency, Well, let me ask this question firstly. Is there a succession plan in place?
At the agency, no. There's no formal succession plan.
Why not?
I would say, Honourable Member, the current structure, if you look at the organization at its various levels, does not allow for easy succession. The organization is pretty flat across its departments. So it is something that is required for the safety of the organization. And it is something that I know that this strategic planning process that we are undertaking is going to treat with.
Mr. Ammon, you're a very confusing individual. You're saying there's difficulty in the development of a succession plan because the organization is flat.
Yeah,
but yet on the last occasion that we met with this committee, you appointed Mr. Bissessa to come here to answer questions that were meant for you. How do you respond to that?
What happened, because I had realized that I was not going to be able to attend, the team that you see in front of you, Honourable Member, worked assiduously together in putting together the
Mr.
responses.
Ammon, let me stop you.
Yeah.
I like to zero in on facts and within a specific framework.
Yes.
Whatever process you all would have used in terms of preparing for the meeting, that's fine. I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in you because you drive, a CEO drives an organization. A CEO offers an organization good governance and leadership. And I'm not too sure, based on all that I've been hearing here this morning, that there is value for money with regards to the NTA. I will leave that there because we would have all drawn our own conclusions. Another area of concern to me, and perhaps it's based on my life activities in ensuring that persons who operate in the work environment get a fair day's pay for fair day's work, and at the end of the day, that when they go home with a pension. So in the twilight of their years, they have a little comfort. I am deeply troubled, Mr. Ammon, with regards to what is in place or what is not in place at the agency with regards to the employees of the organization. We were told that there is a pension plan in place, but actually it's not a pension plan at all. Kindly enlighten this committee as to what exactly is in place to cover staff when they retire from the organization.
Honourable Member, that is the only plan that is in place, and it's really referred, the name of it is really a superannuation plan, and that plan has been in existence in the company since 2003. From what I saw, the former board in 2012 had identified that it wasn't the ideal thing for staff, and I saw where attempts were made to introduce a pension plan. I also saw where the process stopped. And with this new incoming board, they also have determined that this is not the ideal situation for staff. And through the investigation into this whole, the workings of the plan, I think that they would probably come to the same conclusion that something better needs to be done for staff. So I agree with you, Honourable Member, that it is not the ideal. It has been seen to not be the ideal, but it is something that has been in place since 2003. It was something that was actually agreed to by Cabinet at the time, and to change that, it would probably need Cabinet's approval again.
What have you done to correct the situation? What have you done? So you did indicate you came into the organization in July 2014.
Yes.
Which is a little beyond 3.5 years.
Yes.
What did you do when you came into the organization and you realized that it was not a pension plan?
The decision to change a plan of that nature is really in the remit of the board, honorable member.
Mr. Aman.
Yes.
It is based on the information that you as the CEO would place before the board to enable the board.
Yes, and the board was aware of it.
In arriving at a decision.
Correct, what I'm saying, honorable member, is that the board was aware.
I'm just trying to find out whether or not you did anything.
Yeah, no, I didn't do anything because the board had the same board that I served with prior to me coming had attempted to address the situation, and then they did not continue. So that pretty much would have been the decision at the time, to remain as it was.
I am deeply troubled when I read information that states with regards to the Universal Retirement Fund, there is no signed agreement between the National Training Agency and the Unit Trust Corporation for the formalization of the Universal Retirement Fund. Is that correct, Mr. Aman?
That is something that would have been observed.
Is that correct,
It is.
Mr.
It is
Aman?
correct. It is correct.
I'm asking simple questions.
Yes, it is correct.
No reconciliation are prepared for the Universal Retirement Fund to reconcile the balances recorded on UTC's semi-annual statements to actual contributions and withdrawals for the period. Is that correct?
Yes, that was well, yes. If it's a yes answer, yes.
NTA's contributions remitted to UTC for a member of staff included amounts for the 6 months probationary period. Is that correct?
Yes.
No HR correspondence was seen in the payroll file for July 2015 for instances where additional URF contributions were remitted to UTC on behalf of employees. Is that correct?
Yes, those were the findings of the audit at the time.
Mr. Aman, this does not really reflect well on you as the CEO of the organization.
Honorable member, again, I would ask the members to appreciate that this is what I found at the agency, and efforts were made to correct those issues to date. Some of them have not yet been closed. I can tell you this.
Mr. Aman,
I gave a commitment.
1 second, please.
Yes.
All the issues I cited here,
yes.
You agreed that they are existing.
I'm not too sure if all are existing at this moment because there was an update done just earlier this week. I haven't had sight of that update because we were preparing.
Right. So, Mr. Aman, could you send forward this committee, all the information pertaining to the Universal Retirement Fund?
Yes.
Please include your attempts at correcting the situation. That means any notes that were placed before the board, any letters that were written to the UTC, any information that would assist us in understanding that there have been attempts in correcting this situation. And I would just, Mr. Chairman, in ending, I would just like to indicate to the chair that this committee holds you and your board responsible to ensure that this situation is corrected. This situation is a scandalous one. People are working in an organization. They have been told, because the information coming to this committee says there's a pension plan. That's the information before this committee, that NTA has a pension plan when it turned out to be a superannuation arrangement. So we will hold you and your board, Madam Chair, responsible for this situation. Finally, I am not at all convinced that the NTA, that the people of Trinidad and Tobago are getting value for money from this organization. I know my fellow member of this committee would go into the precise areas. For example, has the agency conducted a national survey to determine the national occupation needs? 80% of your operating costs is going in paying administrative expenses and salaries. What is the vision for the NTA in terms of national development? Those are some of the issues that I would have expected you to zero in and pronounce upon.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Now call on Mr. Foster Cummings.
Thank you very much, Chairman. And good morning to the PS and staff from the Ministry and to the members of the management of NTA and the Ministry of Finance. My first question is for the PS from the Ministry. How critical to the education system is the NTA from the Ministry's point of view?
Given that the NTA is responsible in a small nutshell quality for TVET, and the ministry recognizes that there is a need to promote TVET, I would say NTA is very critical to the Ministry of Education.
Is there any other agency or division of the ministry that duplicates the work performed by the NTA?
No, not at this time.
Member Small raised earlier the question of output. Is the ministry satisfied that the NTA is performing up to par in terms of what its objectives are?
Given what has been coming out recently, where we are probing more closely into NTA, I would say we have some concerns, and really we have to look into it much more closely.
Thank you very much, PS. You've answered my questions. To the CEO, just some basic information I want to get from my own information. Where is the headquarters of the NTA, and how many offices do you have, and how many members of staff do you have?
At present, we have 132 members of staff. We are located on Mulchan Suchan Road in Chaguanas, and we have one satellite office which we are closing next month at the Ramcharan Street, on Ramcharan Street. So the staff is going to be brought into the head office.
Ramcharan Street in Chaguanas?
Yes, but the lease has been closed on that, and we're into the last month of that arrangement. So the head office, the only building for the NTA, would now be the one situated at Mulchan Suchan Road in Chaguanas.
What is the cost of rental there, and what was the cost of rental at the satellite office that you're closing?
We would have reduced the cost of that. So. Yeah, initially it was $124,000 per month, but we negotiated with the landlord last year, and that was brought down to just up to $109.
Which one of the offices are you referring to?
The head office.
The head office?
Yes, the one on Ramcharan Street was
$124,000 per month.
Yes, it's
and
now
you've negotiated
$109.
a cost of now $109,000 per month.
Yes.
And what is the remaining term on that lease?
If I'm not mistaken, COPSEC, that's on an annual basis, right? It's 1 year, it's annual. We would have reduced the we would have indicated to the landlord at the time of the signing of the new lease that we could not commit to more than 1 year, that we were hoping that the ministry would help us to find premises that we did not
So you signed a new 1-year lease when?
Yeah, right. Oh, yeah, sorry. It was a 2-year lease with 1 year remaining, sir.
1 year remaining on
Yes.
2 years. Now, back to the office, the satellite office at Ramcharan Street. What's the rental there?
$31,000. $50.
And that will expire when?
April.
April of this year?
Of this year, correct.
At which time the staff from there will move to your head office?
Yes.
If I come off this matter, let me just get back to the PS. A member raised earlier, I think it was Member Hines, if I'm not mistaken, or the chairman, the possibility of housing the NTA at the head office of the ministry to treat with cost savings. And that discussion, I'm not sure, came to a conclusion, but I got the impression that there was floor space, as you mentioned, but there were no workstations. Is that the only factor preventing such a possibility from occurring?
As I would have stated earlier, we have a request in front of us right now for NIHAs to come into the building. And we are looking at that. I cannot say how that will work out because that's an additional 60 persons. If we agree with NIHAs coming in, it will cut down on at least what possible space we have to consider over 100 persons from NTA to come into the towers. And as I said, we have 2 towers, but one is fully occupied with the accounting unit for the Ministry of Education. And everything will have to be in one tower, which is Tower A, which I really cannot say at this point that that is a feasible proposal.
Back to Mr. Ahmad. Has the management of NTA been looking at, apart from this negotiation with the landlord, looking at other options for more, let's say, more affordable accommodation?
We have, as far as early 2015, Honourable Member. At that time, we would have communicated with the then former Minister of Tertiary Education and Skills Training, who would have, in conversation with the former Minister of Education, essentially spoken about the need for the NTA to find a space where we would not have to pay rent. And we had looked at one of the schools, where new schools were being built, one of the old schools, to be housed in one of those spaces. At the time, the former Minister of Education would have given his nod of approval, but nothing went further beyond the discussion.
Okay.
But that was definitely something that we had hoped we would have been able to make use of. Not necessarily the whole school, but at least a wing out of the school. So for the past couple of years, we have been hoping that we would be able to find an accommodation that was close to stakeholders, but at the same time, did not incur a cost to the company.
Is it a priority of the management to now put up recommendation before the new board to advance that position?
Of course, and particularly in a forum like this, if it is something that this honourable committee could help us with, of course we'd be happy to accept that help.
Let's just go to the matter of cost reduction that was spoken of earlier. You said that the management under your leadership has been looking at reducing the cost, the operational cost. What has been driving this? Is it the position that the management sees that there was wastage that needs to be cut, or is it the fact that the subvention was reduced?
It was both. What I can tell you, from as early as 2014, we would have realized what was going on in the global economy, and that collapse in oil, the oil prices and the gluttony market actually started 18 months before real action was taken in Trinidad and Tobago. We started from as early as late 2014 taking measures to reduce the costs associated with the operations of the company. So that was through identifying, one, areas where we could have eliminated waste from the operations of the company. Two, through naturally trying to improve the efficiencies of our activities. At the same time, we reconfiguring how we marketed ourselves. So a lot of money would have been expended during that time on large public engagements, things like what we used to call career fairs. In those days, those things would cost millions of dollars and a lot of public advertising to promote TVET. One of the challenges that TVET face in Trinidad and Tobago, and not just here, but
what is TVET?
Technical Vocational Education and Training. Yeah. I'm sorry, I presume that.
Well, we have listeners as well.
Yes, yes. So it's Technical Vocational Education and Training, and one of the problems that TVET has faced is that there's what we call in education the lack of parity of esteem. And what that simply means is that the general public tends to be more attracted to the space of academia in developing themselves. And promoting TVET was important to say to the workforce and to the youngsters out there that looking at a TVET career was a viable and sustainable career option. So what we did was we reshaped that process from those large career fairs, and we engaged schools directly. And we would have also, instead of a mass media campaign, utilized a social media campaign. And based on the numbers, we were very, very successful in that transformation. So while we were able to sustain the movement in terms of the promotion of TVET, Honorable Member, we were also able to eradicate millions of dollars of spend in how we promoted it before. Now, I want to say it was not a mistake that spend was like that, because in the life cycle of the agency, there was a point in time when it was very necessary for that type of activity to take place, to gain ground in the space and the acceptance of TVET as something viable for education. So,
thank you, Mr. Ahmed.
Yes, yes, yes.
I think you have. I allowed you a little room to explain.
Sure.
Yourself there, and you may have. Let me just get back to some specific things, because some of the members raised some concerns. I also had some concerns. I was quite perturbed reading the internal audit findings. And I think that any citizen of this country will be disturbed if any state agency utilizing taxpayers' funds were to find themselves in this position. Now, and this from your internal auditors, you have said to us that a lot of these things have been corrected to date.
Yes, sir.
But it's very troubling. Absence of an approved vendors list, which treats with the matter of procurement. Has that matter been addressed? Do you have an official list of contractors or vendors that you now do business with, approved by the board?
Right, and we do have a list before the board, as well as a process for expanding the list before the tenders committee of the board. That would have been submitted to the board late last year. So the tenders committee is treating with that at the moment.
Before you go on,
yes.
So you came in 2014.
Yes.
There was no approved vendors list for procurement. Between 2014 and last year, when the management submitted that list, what was done? What applied?
Right. Would you like to explain the process? Yeah, I'd like to let the Senior Manager of Finance and Corporate Services walk you through the procurement process.
Well, I'm not asking that.
Yes.
I want to come back to you. I want to ask you, as the CEO of the organization.
Yes.
You came in 2014.
Yes.
You were aware that no approved vendors list existed and that there were issues with the procurement. I want to know, from 2014 to now, what applied? Was a list put in place?
Yeah, there was yes, there was.
Did the board approve it? Was it an approved list? Was it an ad hoc list?
Right.
Tell me from your position.
There was a list that was existing. I think what was flagged was that the list was not something that would have gone through a board approval. So there was a list that had existed from before. The steps that have been taken now?
It was a list generated how? And What was the process? It was just a list that somebody put together. It went through no process. It was, if it was not approved by the board, what then is the legality of that list? Did someone sit and just write down a list of vendors that should be used? How did we come about with this list?
The list would, I suspect, would have been compiled over the years of operations of the company, and the company having done business with stakeholders. The procurement process is normally
You continued using this list from 2014 to last year without trying to put in place a proper procurement system?
It was the list that I met. When the audit finding was triggered, the process of correcting all of these actions began. So, like I said, that was one of the audit findings that we would have treated with the new board.
The other matters raised here, the other concerns, no account receivables prepared, lack of adequate source documents. This is a poor state of affairs.
Yeah.
Have these things been addressed? Yeah. No incorrect postings to the general ledger?
Yeah, all of those things would have been corrected, yes.
You took steps to correct all these things?
Yes, sir. And it was not, I mean, we're talking about finance here, but every audit finding across every department has been receiving focused attention. And we are almost to completion in nearly every finding. So,
okay, thank you. I'm not seeing the name down to my far left, but the Senior Internal Auditor. Ms.
Yes,
Prince,
Ms. Prince,
sorry.
yes.
Thank you. Ms. Prince, from the internal audit position, is there some satisfaction that these matters have been rectified?
So, as of our most recent recommendation tracking exercise, which ended 2 weeks ago on the 8th of February, we actually would have received information from the Finance Department, and we tested this information, and there was closure to a number of these items. This closure would have taken place between mid last year and early this year. So now, as at 2017, before this recommendation tracking exercise, there were 57% of findings outstanding prior to August 2017. And this last exercise here, we have seen that there was a closure of 46% of this amount, so we now just have 11% that is outstanding. So a number of the findings were closed by the Finance Department as of January 2018.
Thank you for your assistance.
Yes, I call on Dr.
Thank you so much, Chair, for allowing the opportunity. If I could address my first question, Chair, I have two. My first question to the CEO that I'm glad is here with us today. With regard to the role and mandate of the NTA, and that, of course, would be coordinating administering the National Training System for Technical and Vocational Education and Training, which is TVET, right? Do you have in your possession that you can share with us the number of TVET certifications taking place within the time that you would have been there? How many TVET certifications would have happened total between 2014 to 2018?
But when we prepared the information, we would have prepared information either from the time certification started or from 2008. But
certainly, though,
yes.
If this is the core mandate of the institution,
yes,
that is data that is collected every single year, yes. I would expect.
Yes.
So you have a register, therefore, indicating what certifications would have taken place every single year.
Yes.
Is that disaggregated by location, subject, gender, level?
It is. It is.
And how does that impact your planning? Because that is your core mandate. So all the other things we're discussing here are ready to ensure that you fulfill your mandate.
Yes.
What is the trend you have been noticing between 2014 and 18? I'm just using the time that you have been there. What is the trend you have been noticing with respect to TVET certifications?
Right. So we certify people in three spaces. We certify people in schools.
I know, but just give me an overall trend. What do you see happening with TVET certification?
TVET certification has been on the increase. Within the last year, however, we have, that will be borne out at the end of the certification period. But stakeholders have expressed to us challenges that they've been facing in the use of the CVQs, and I'll tell you why.
Okay. No, I don't want to go into that. I want to understand the core data you are using as an institution to guide your performance.
Right.
So if your mandate is to promote and coordinate technical and vocational training, what percentage increases have you seen over 2014, 15, 16? What percentage increases have you seen? And if you're seeing a decrease now, by what percentage is that?
Right. Pauline, you would have. Right. In CVQ in schools, right, there's been a steady increase.
What are the percentages we are speaking about?
So within the last 3 to 4 years, we have pretty much doubled the amount of CVQs, full CVQs awarded in schools for all the years prior. Those figures are sustained even at the post-secondary and as well as in the space of something we call PLAR.
Are they collected as a percentage of the total population, school population? How do you collect the data?
Right. But no, we collect the data on the number of candidates that's going to be sitting the CVQ training and of course assessment.
So how much was that in 2014? Let's just
right. So in 2014, you would have had 1,852 candidates in the secondary schools.
And in 2015?
And in 2015, you would have 1,992.
16?
1,875 and 17, 2003. So those figures, they fall within a range, but it's not static, right?
Let me ask further.
Yes.
Based on those numbers, what is the trend in terms of locations? Where do you find most of your students taking part in the CVQs?
Well, it's really based on the program that they're doing.
Well, that's a different question, though.
Yes.
What I'm trying to understand is this is your core mandate.
Yes.
And this type of data definitely I would expect is collected. So this is really a question about how you gauge your own performance.
Yes.
Therefore, I'm asking you, what locations do you find with the greatest number of students participating in a TVET?
That would be either in the post-secondary institutions.
No, I'm asking geographical location.
Oh, no, there's a spread. It's really linked to the training institution. So, for instance, there was, through the Ministry of Education, there's 83 schools approved to award the CVQs. So you would
and what locations are they? Are they equally divided among all of the administrative districts of the Ministry of Education?
It's mostly the government institutions. The government schools.
Mr. Aman,
you're looking for
the difficulty you have in answering my question suggests to me
there is a spread.
There's a spread, I understand that, but the difficulty you have in answering these questions suggests to me that in respect of gauging your performance, for example, if you found more of these institutions in, let's say, in the north, over time what this would mean is that if you're promoting TVET education, you may be looking now to introduce more centers in the south because it would allow those in the south greater access. Because if we are promoting TVET as a valuable way of entrepreneurship, of living, as a way of living, and you're ensuring that you are promoting that, then that kind of information and collecting it in that way and disaggregating it in that way will give you important trends and patterns that you would need to address. And if a strategic plan is being made up, obviously those are the inputs that would take place there. Because I can ask you further about sex or gender, let me put it that way. I can ask you about gender, who is participating. I can ask you further about the level of performance in the different areas. And if you find that in one area you're not getting a high level of performance, what is the role of the NTA in addressing that and in assisting to address those things. Because as I look at the travel and the capacity building over the time, I mean, 32 people in 2008, and it just goes up and up. And if we are looking at that and we're saying we're building capacity, to what end? It must come back and redound to the benefit of those who are supposed to get that benefit. And if the data is not being collected in a way that would afford you to see and to notice those patterns and trends, then how is it that you're making decisions and determinations about where you apply effort, where you advertise and have these career fairs, and how you target on social media? Are you addressing or trying to pull more young women into it? Is that, and based on what data are you doing that? Is it just anecdotal? Your difficulty in answering the questions I'm asking suggests to me that there is a lot of work to be done there, and that really, above everything else, is the core mandate of what you should be doing. Without that, how can you proceed?
Yes, and Honourable Member, at this point in time, the work that we do is, like I said, is in partnership with the actual training institution. So the spread of schools that provide the CVQs is something approved by the Ministry of Education. And it's...
Mr. Arman?
Yeah.
The primary responsibility of the NTA I'm seeing here, established training centers or skill centers. And I could well imagine that would be in partnership with existing schools and so.
Yes.
But if you see a gap, how can you recognize a gap if you are not collecting the data to recognize it? So if there's a gap in a particular area or for a particular subject, how are you recognizing that gap if the data is not being collected? And if your role is to establish training centers, whether in partnership or not, I am submitting that if you're not collecting the data, you will not know where they should be established. You will not know where the greatest impact will be felt. And therefore, you will not be completing your mandate or fulfilling it in the way that will redound to the maximum benefit of the citizens of the country that depend on you to do so.
And Honourable Member, we do collect the data. What we do with the data, though, is we look at basically the progress that students are making in getting full awards in CVQ. So in the TVET space, you can either get partial awards or full awards. And one of the measures that we look at is how many students go through the system and end up with the full award. And
so, Mr.
that
Arman,
has been on the improve. Yeah,
if I can ask a specific question, in let's say 2016, when you would have been there, in 2016, which was your best performing TVET subject?
Yeah, we have that data. Polling video.
In the secondary schools, it was data operations.
And what was your worst?
I would say there are several occupational areas, and there are several standards in motor vehicle maintenance, and I would say the worst is the motor vehicle chassis system, level 1.
And is this considered a valuable TVET area?
Yes, it is.
It is.
And what area performed the worst? Out of that bad performing one, which areas would have suffered the worst performances?
In terms of the performances.
What geographic locations?
I wouldn't be able to glean that data at this point in time from what I have in front of me.
Well, that should be a standard report. That should be in a standard report. And worse than that, or more, or added to that, what steps were taken by the NTA to address that?
Right. So we do have the data, Honourable Member. It's just what
I'm past the data now. I'm past the data. I'm actually asking now, what steps did you take in recognizing that this valuable TVET area is the worst performing in that year? What steps were taken at that point to address that?
Based on how we proceed with the Ministry of Education with regard to the implementation of the CVQ in secondary schools, we constantly make recommendations to the Ministry of Education through the TVET unit, Ministry of Education.
And essentially, Honourable Member, the question that you asked is to the heart of it. You would find that what we do is constant training with the teachers. That's one of the ways we try to treat with issues in terms of delivery. You would also find that sometimes there are resource issues at the school itself, which is something that is, again, outside of our remit, and that's where the recommendations come in, because the assessments are very clear. The assessment says in a very systematic way what the person is competent in and what they are not yet competent in. And coming out of the spaces where you can see where somebody is not yet competent, you understand whether it's a delivery issue or whether it was a challenge with resourcing at the school. So the recommendations coming out of that analysis, and you're perfectly right, that is how you look at the data so that you can improve on it, and that's exactly what we do.
Unfortunately, I am not satisfied. I am not sure the members of the committee are, but I am not satisfied. One, because of the difficulty of getting the data out there. Two, none of this has been explained by location, so it does not appear to me as though those types of reports exist and are readily available and inform further action. And in addition to that, for an organization that receives a large amount of taxpayers' purse, and for staff that must be certainly very, very, very high on the capacity level because you have been undergoing quite a lot of training, I am not satisfied that, say, you make recommendations to the Ministry of Education. Your core mandate is technical and vocational training. Yes. And I have not heard anything that satisfies me that enough attention is being paid in that area with respect to how it's being done, how it's being marketed, and how it's being delivered. And I'm not satisfied that enough is being done really to get the kind of data necessary, to target in the way necessary, and really promote technical and vocational education as a viable way of living for many of our young persons in the secondary school system and in the post-secondary school system. I do have more, but I will stop here and give way for someone else too.
All right, I'll ask Mr. Hines, and I have a few questions.
Very kindly, Mr. Chairman. Madam PS, are you, or well, were you aware that the NTA ran a bit of a credit union there?
No, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. When did you assume chairmanship?
In August of 2017.
All right, thank you very kindly. Mr. CEO?
Sir.
We have noticed from the records that you operated a bit of a credit union inside of your agency. A lending agency. Yeah? On what basis, on what authority did you oversee the lending of taxpayers' money inside of the NTA? What is the legal basis? Or on what authority did you decide to do that?
That was a practice that I met honorable member and that I stopped as well.
When did you stop that?
That would have been, I think, I'd have to check the records, but sometime in 2016.
Let me see. Yeah.
Brian, when did I issue the instruction to stop the...
And you came in, you put an end in 2016?
Yes.
And you came in 2014? So you
Mid-2014.
So you oversaw the thing for just over a year?
Yeah, it was a practice that was in the company. And we put a stop to it when money became a challenge, and we did not want to risk
but during your time there, when you oversaw it, are you able to tell us what was the legal basis on which you conducted a lending affair with taxpayers' money in the NTA?
It was just a practice that I found in the organization, and it was something that was done to assist the employees in times of need, but it was something that I put an end to.
And while that happened under your watch, without obviously any legal basis or authority, because the taxpayers of this country cannot imagine that their money is being used like that, And to compound that, no standard operating procedures for the granting of loans to staff who are the beneficiaries of Kindles. And by the way, on that Kindle point, let me just revert to that for 1 second. You gave these gifts on an annual basis for Christmas?
No.
Or was it only in that particular Kindle affair?
That was what happened. The practice of the company was every year for Christmas, the staff would have been given a present by the company.
So that happened on an annual basis.
But for that period, that Kindle was the last time any gifts were given to the staff.
So let me come back.
One, and it was in
come
commemoration of the celebration.
Let me come back to your loan facility. I see here that during your tenure in fiscal 2015, loans were granted without submission of supporting documentation.
Not under my time, as far as I know.
Yes, 2015, from what your auditors are saying here.
They would have tracked a period that would have been beyond 2015.
I am seeing here your auditors say 2015, fiscal 2015, which means 14-15. Okay? I'm just dealing with what your auditors say. And further, staff loan reconciliations were not completed during 14-15, sometime when you were there. Now, a lot of this, and a lot that we have read, and a lot that you are claiming now that have been fixed, presented particularly wonderful opportunities for mismanagement and misuse of taxpayers' funds. All of the looseness that we have been reading here all morning is doubly frightening to me because those conditions present opportunities, procurement issues, lending money without documentation, travel to Mexico, Germany, Canada, London. Over 50% of the management gone, against the background of what Member Gatsby Dolly just told us. These things actually presented an opportunity or opportunities for mismanagement, misuse of public monies. You will agree with that?
Yes, and that is why...
Will you agree with that?
Of course I agree. And that is why the...
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah. May I be allowed to just raise a few issues? And then
I just want to tie up.
Okay.
Thank you kindly, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Ammon, you said you stopped this rather highly unusual and unacceptable practice. When in 2016?
What do you also say? October.
All right, in October 2016.
In October, Madam Honourable Member.
When this practice, Madam PS, you said you did not know about this situation. All right. So when this arrangement was brought to an end in October 2016, did the agency recover all outstanding loans owed?
Yes, to the best, yes. The manager has just confirmed that that was done, yes.
Chairman, permit me. To the senior internal auditor, is that information correct? Are you satisfied that the agency was able to recover all loans extended to members of staff when the arrangement came to an end?
During the time of the audit, because of the method in which they would recover the funds, it would basically be a drawdown from the actual salary on a monthly basis. Yes, they were able to recover all the funds at that time. After the audit, though, after whether it was July 2016 or October 2016, I am not sure. So I'll have to submit that in writing once I can get that information. But up to the time of the audit, yes, they were able to recover.
So, Chairman, I would want to request of the CEO a full report on this lending situation, when it began, the basis upon which public funds were used to act, to allow the organization to act as a lending agency, the total cost of loans granted to staff over the period of time up to October 2016. A full report on this issue.
Yes. Yes.
May I just add to that?
Yes.
The number of loans.
Of course.
To whom granted.
You will get a full
and
thorough
proof of
report.
satisfactory reconciliation.
Yes, yes.
And of course, the amounts
That would have
earned
been
in
low.
interest, if applicable.
Of course. Yeah, no interest.
No interest? Oh, it was really a good facility then.
For the staff, yes.
All right, thank you very much. You, just before I close, you will agree that that is discriminatory to other citizens who cannot get a loan without interest. Breach of the Constitution.
Unless it's Islamic banking.
Breach of the Constitution. Not everyone enjoys that equal treatment under the law.
Yes.
Interest-free. But I'll give way to the chair, Mr.
Yes,
Chairman.
yes, thank you very much. Now, I just wanted to ask, based on what Mrs. Primus asked earlier.
Yes, sir.
Is there a trade union in that organization?
There is. It's
What's the name of the union?
The Oil Field Workers Trade Union, sir.
All right. You said you had 2 offices, one on Ramsaran and the headquarters on Mulchan, Suchan, right?
Yeah, Honorable Member, we have a satellite office. It's just a room, really, in the MIC technology compound in Tobago as well, right? And
so apart from the one in
and that's
Ramsaran,
rent-free. That's rent-free. The MIC allows us to use the space.
But the one on Ramsaran Street, how many workers were engaged there out of the staff of 132?
Originally, it would have been around 14 staff members, and the space was used to have larger meetings at times. The majority of that staff has moved to the office. We've been, gradually bringing everybody across and the equipment and so on. And we'll be closing off the total closure of the office by next month.
Could you share with us what might have been the rationale for going to that
At
location?
that time, it was really the inability to hold all of the staff at the head office originally. When I joined the company, the staff count was 161. Today it's 132. So what has been happening over the period? We have not been filling vacancies. There's been a lateral distribution of the work or vertical distribution of the workload. And there has been some reorganizing of how we do our work as well. So, that has enabled us to be able to bring the staff back.
May I ask the Investments Division at this time to clarify for this committee, how does the Investments Division ensure oversight and accountability in state enterprises, taking into account what we have heard from the NTA?
Generally, the Investment Division follows the guidelines in the manual, in the State Enterprises Performance Manual, with the monitoring of the state enterprises, where you look at the cash statement of operations. One of the main ones is the financial statements, the budgets, the strategic plan. With respect to the NTA, I must say, 2012 or 2011, NTA was not on the list of state enterprises, and the PAEC wrote the Ministry of Finance Investment Division inquiring why. The Ministry of Finance did some investigations and eventually wrote them back in 2012, stating that it was a wholly owned company. But subsequently, the ministry, in dealing with the NTA and trying to change auditors, and then they realized that the ministry had no rule with respect to that. This ministry, the Investment Division, also got legal advice from the Treasury Solicitor, who told us that our role in respect of the NTA is not like state enterprises, because we are not a shareholder. They don't have shares, they have members. And Corporation Soul is not a member. So some of NTA problems with respect to the financial statements is because I think they couldn't, the members were not there to change auditors. They have a role that is similar to a shareholder. And they were not there, I don't know if they couldn't find them or what, to change the auditors so that they could audit the financial statements. And up to I think last month I spoke to education, and they told me they were taking steps to get the members in place. So although we had written NTA when we wrote the PAC and telling them they were a state enterprise, we sent the manual and things, but really, they are not really considered as state enterprises as advised by the Treasury Solicitor.
But in those circumstances, PS, Ministry of Education, how do we ensure that taxpayers' monies that are funneled and channeled to the NTA, given this hybrid arrangement that exists in terms of this company, how are we going to address that? I think we had raised that briefly last time. Could you tell us what steps are being taken to bring this NTA under, the state enterprise sector?
That clarification that was provided by Investments Division was a relatively recent clarification. So we are now in the process of looking at our role in appointing members of the NTA. On the last occasion, I explained that I have sought legal advice internally on the question of changing of the external auditors. And we recently, as on the 14th of February, wrote to the chairman of the board indicating that, pointing out to the chairman that according to the articles, changing an external auditor is not simply a board decision. It should really be the members, and that we ask the question whether they really want, if this current board wants to change the external auditors. We are waiting a response. I think we will be getting one very, very shortly. However, we are looking as a ministry into appointing members of the NTA. But prior to this recent clarification, the Ministry of Education thought that NTA was like a state enterprise and that the Investments Division had a role and the Ministry of Education had its role. And for example, we never got audit reports because in accordance to the manual, those audit reports are supposed to go to the Investments Division. So we never had sight of that. And so we were staying within in accordance with the manual, we were monitoring NTA as if it was a state enterprise and doing we released funds to them and we would check out their administrative reports, the strategic plan, we'll look at the financial statements and the audited financial statements. So there was a limited amount of monitoring we were doing because we thought investments would have been doing theirs as well. But now that this is clarified, we will, as I say, have to put things in place as the Ministry of Education to monitor that agency much more closely than we did prior to now.
Madam Chairman of NTA, is there a legal document incorporating the NTA that we can have?
Yes, there is, Chairman, and we can make that available.
Yeah, we would appreciate that.
Thank you kindly, Mr. Chairman. I would like to ask Ms. Babb, the construct of the NTA from the investment division perspective ought to be unusual.
Currently, the UTT has a similar construction, but the difference in UTT is that corporations always are members.
Well, that's the next question I was coming to, because it's unusual since corporation sole does not have a role to play, so that it is not, from where I sit, that's a situation that requires urgent attention, because really, Chairman, the NTA as it is a runaway horse, and there's nobody that can stop the runaway horse. Neither the ministry has oversight, the investment division cannot intervene, the corporation sole cannot intervene. So that this is a most unusual situation, Mr. Chairman, based on what has just emerged, that requires urgent attention at the highest levels.
I must also say that with respect to NTA, I think if you look at the articles of not incorporation, articles of association and memorandum of association, the name that was given to it on it is not National Training Agency, it's National Training Agency Limited. So all these things need to be clarified when it comes to NTA. I think when I spoke to the corporate secretary, he told me there were different companies like with similar names, and apparently the current NTA are using those documents. But that name needs to be clarified, and that whole articles need to be redone. So the company of itself needs a lot of work when it comes from the legal aspect of it.
Yes, I think Mr. Foster, and then you will have to.
Mr. Arman. You mentioned earlier in response to a question that the NTA was utilizing funds from its saving account to fill the gap that's created by the shortfall
over the last 2 years, yes.
Over the last 2 years?
Yes. Well, the last fiscal period and now.
Okay.
And present, yes.
How did the NTA come about that quantum in the savings?
I can speak to the
and what's the figure?
Right. It's approximately just over 44 million, honorable member.
How did the NTA come about saving such a handsome amount of money?
And those savings would have been accrued over several fiscal periods. What I do know is that monies were accrued for the collective bargaining, the outstanding periods. So, for instance, at the management line, there's been no collective agreement conclusion.
Right, let me just rephrase my question.
Yeah.
Is it that these funds were put aside for a specific purpose and it's now being utilized to service the...
Right. Those funds were basically funds allocated for subvention, and I can tell you for the period during my time, sums that would have been added to those residual balances came out of reduced spending. So monies allocated for specific, expenses that we did not through the change in what we were doing, did not need to spend anymore.
Does the NTA require ministry approval to utilize those funds for the purpose is being utilized now?
That has not been my understanding. PS may have to enlighten us on that.
Before my colleague asks, Madam PS, could you, Madam PS, could you clarify for us the situation where there appears to be a savings mechanism based on what the CEO has said, amounted to $44 million, and you as the accounting officer of the Ministry of Education and the NTA falls under you. How is that possible? I thought monies that are retained by any ministry or government entity would be returned to the consolidated fund. So how come we have an agency with a savings of 44 million? And who monitors the use of that money? Because it is taxpayers' money. Being reminded it's being used to offset deficits by the organization without your knowledge. Are you aware of this fund?
Since we started getting the financial statements, which I mentioned earlier, we started getting it recently. So we got October, November, December. We noted that cash and cash balances really have amounted to as of January 31st, was 46.6 million for the current month, which is a slight reduction from the previous month. So we noticed that, and we suspected that that is how they were managing with a deficit of over $600, about 600,000, sorry, a month. Now, with the agencies, the practice used to be that whatever is allocated, and I'm talking about what is the practice in the ministry, we would give them, let's say, 1/12 each month, and according to the statements, we'll see how they are spending it. But if we haven't been getting these statements and we get it at the end of the year with next year's budget, we would probably not be aware that savings taking place until the end of a financial year. So I am going to say that basically the agencies don't send back the money that is unutilized for us to return it to the consolidated fund. That has been the practice. Correct me if I'm wrong, Director.
Yeah.
So what happens in a situation like that where monies are not returned to you and you are the accounting officer who has to release monies given the allocation that we approve in the Parliament to the particular agency? If you are aware now that there's a balance of $46 million as at the end of the 31st of January 2018, what is your role in continuing to release monies that is approved by the Parliament to the NTA, knowing full well that there is a special fund within that organization that you seem not to have any control over, and there is no real mechanism of accountability from what we are seeing? Could you explain to us, and what measures you can take to effectively have some level of management or recall of those funds in these circumstances?
Given our information now, before we release any more money, we would really be seeking the advice of the Comptroller of Accounts. Because usually we would get a request from the agencies how much money they want over a 3-month period. And it's on that basis we would request the funds from Comptroller. Given this information now, we will have to seek advice on what we should be doing going forward.
My brother, David Small.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to unwind the discussion that we just had, Mr. Chairman. I am deeply concerned. If I sit as the CEO or on the board of a state enterprise, and we have an annual budget, I understand the process. You sit to the ministry and you outline what your plans are for the year, and you say this is the money we need. I would have thought in that discussion, by the way, PS, we have some money outstanding from the previous year or the previous years. I am not hearing, this is where I am concerned. I understand that we have to do something going forward. I am dealing with the actions that have led to this accumulation of money. You cannot, as I see it, sit in charge of an entity and tell the ministry we need $34 million next year to run our entity, and we have $46 million sitting there from accumulated from previous allocations to run the entity. That, I don't want to use that word in here, but that action to me is questionable. It is questionable. Yeah, and I'm not even looking for a response. I am making a statement. That action is questionable, and I'm being very polite. Because taxpayers' money has been accrued, it's been loaned to the staff interest-free, all sorts of things are going on. So, Mr. Chairman, I wanted to stop on that, but I have a question for the CEO. Do you have a company credit card?
No.
Are there any company credit cards at NTA?
No.
No, you stopped that practice.
There were prepaid credit cards before, but those prepaid credit cards were used for the purchase of the Kindles. It was an online purchase at the time, and then subsequently the cards were closed.
Prepaid credit cards for the purchase of Kindles with taxpayers' money. Here we go again. I have another short question. And I want to say this, I want to put on record that as a member of this committee, I'm very pleased with at least one member of your team who has demonstrated rigor in the work that they've done. The internal auditor in charge of producing these documents has demonstrated rigor, and in terms of when we ask questions, we can immediately see where the work was done. And she must be commended for the work that she's been doing, because it allows us to understand at least somebody in there is looking at what is happening and is able to accurately and concisely state what the matter is. Because we've gotten some responses today that were responses but not answers. Yeah. I have one quick question. Again, before I close, Mr. Chairman, the overtime, do any members of staff of the NTA receive overtime?
Yes.
What categories of staff receive overtime?
Those would be the custodians and at times drivers as well.
What would be the annual bill in terms of average, or do you have an estimate of what you're paying overtime per year?
We would have to provide that in writing to you, sir.
The finance manager doesn't have an idea of any range of sum of money?
Honorable member, it actually fluctuates. Those persons are covered by the collective bargaining agreement, but I don't have that figure in front of me for current period.
Yeah, but
Okay, that's fine. I have one last question. In terms of your travel, and I suppose in terms of, I would understand that the CEO, you would probably, I want to understand the approval process for your travel and then travel of other members of staff within the entity, because based on the information we have, there's a lot of people traveling, attending, as my good colleague said, London, Panama, wherever, attending all sorts of things to build capacity, which I suppose we understand.
Yes.
So that when you have to travel overseas, what is the approval process?
Well, if I have to travel, that all of my travel would first have to be approved by the board.
And has that been adhered to?
Yes.
On every occasion?
Of course, yes.
Good. So that in terms of...
It's 8 times my managers told me it's 8 times.
And for the line, the people below you in the line, they will be approved by you?
With board as well, sir.
Board as well?
Yes, yes.
All right. Mr. Chairman, I have a lot of other questions, but I'll stop because I know we're running tight on time.
Yeah. May I also ask, as the chair or the CEO, where is this account? At which bank is this $46 million as at the end of the 31st of January held as we speak?
Yeah, the First Citizens Bank, sir.
Okay. Could you submit to this committee a detailed statement?
Yes.
As it relates to this account, right?
Yes.
And could you also advise in writing how has monies been drawn down from this account, and for what purposes over the last 10 years? Because this apparently has been accumulating since the commencement of this organization.
Yes, but the only time that you would find, the only time the account would have been used for the deficit would have been only within the last fiscal and this period, honorable member.
But
prior to that, there was no deficit.
But just let me clarify again.
Yes.
If you are using this fund for deficit financing, would the board be aware of this? Would the Ministry of Education be aware of it? Would the State Enterprise Investment Division, rather, be aware of it? Who would be aware, rather, of it for that decision to be taken?
Yes.
Would the CEO, for example, or the management team, right?
Yes.
When they want to draw down to fill that gap or to bridge that gap,
right,
would they have to go to the board of directors?
Yes, sir.
So the board, and I want to get from the chairman, Mrs. Allen, as the chairman of the board of directors, are you aware of the existence of this fund? And what role would the board be playing whenever there is a need to bridge the gap in terms of what the agency would have requested from the ministry, what they actually would have received, and in order to bridge the gap between revenue and expenditure. What is the process as far as you are aware? Because your board has been in place for almost 2 years now?
No, the board was appointed in August of 2017.
Well,
so
you
it's
have
just a
been,
few months.
Yeah, but are you aware of this development?
Yes, we are aware of the existence of the accumulated funds. With respect to how we treat with it, it would be that the management would have to make a request of the board to approve a drawdown on that amount of money and give a justification for it. In the case of this management, they sought an approval to draw down the deficit in terms of what was requested of the ministry and what was provided for the current financial year. The board did not agree to that. The board agreed to provide supplemental funding for a period of 3 months to ensure that we can pay our salaries primarily and our other bills, and to work with management to reduce the expenditure of the organization to bring it in line with what was given by government for the operations for the current fiscal year. The same would apply in cases of agencies such as UTT, where they would have done the same thing in terms of having board approval and seeking ministerial approval as well for the use of those accumulated funds.
Now, could you share with us, as the chairman of the board for the period August to the present time, having been aware of the existence of this fund, would you have brought this to the attention of the Ministry of Education and the Investments Division of the Ministry of Finance, so that both the corporation sole as well as the Minister of Education, through the Ministry of Education, would have been aware of the existence of such a fund as the chairman of this board?
Yes, Chair. You would have noted that the permanent secretary said earlier that she has been receiving financial statements from the NTA with effect from October last year, and that is under the leadership of this board. So that we have, in providing those statements to the ministry, identified all of the funding that we have received, also the accumulated funds, and how we spend those monies on a monthly basis.
Okay. Now, I have a few questions as we try to wrap up here. I know that there are many challenges because of the budget allocation, the increase in deficit, as we are seeing, right? Would you want to share with us, either the chairman or the CEO, about the challenges that you have encountered thus far in your tenure as chairman, and what actions have you taken or are taking to address these challenges that you would have come upon?
Yes, Chair. Just to point out, and some of the things that we discussed earlier, the CEO made mention of the fact that only on one occasion since he has been traveling has there been someone appointed to act in his absence. That would have happened under the leadership of this board. He also spoke about the pre-qualification of vendors for the purpose of providing services to the agency. That notice, again, would have been requested by the Board of Management and published, and that process is also being led by this board. We spoke about the financial statements going to the ministry, the minutes of the board meetings going to the ministry on a monthly basis, the investigation into the Universal Retirement Fund at UTC, the closure of the Ramsaran Street office and the termination of that lease and movement of the staff into the main office, the reduction of expenditure in terms of car parking arrangements. And these things have happened because the board has been paying close attention to what we met in terms of the operations of the NTA and ensuring that we bring the operations in line with good practice, good corporate practice, and accounting to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. The initiation of the external audits as well. We have decided, based on the advice provided by the ministry, to proceed with getting a quotation for the audits for the period 2012 to 2017 from our current auditor, KPMG, and also to seek competitive bids from other firms. We've also, in writing to the ministry in a letter dated yesterday, indicated that we want to proceed as well with the appointment of members to the company so that we can proceed with the annual general meetings, at which time we would discuss matters such as the appointment of external auditors. So the board has been taking on a day-to-day basis almost decisions to address some of the shortcomings that have been brought to our attention and some of the things that we are currently, as you are, very concerned about. In terms of ensuring that the NTA can fulfill its mandate to the people of Trinidad and Tobago, we've also taken decisions with respect to the strategic direction that we will focus on making reliable data readily available on the existing supply and future demand for skills for the needs of the economy, rationalization of the technical and vocational education and training sector in order to improve the quality and performance of the institutions in the sector, to create multiple pathways for success, particularly to reduce the high failure rate we currently have, the dropout rates, the growing number of youth at risk, and address issues such as poverty, social exclusion, and inequity. We also need to improve the efficiency of the use of institutional resources, financial, physical, and human resources in the technical and vocational education sector to better serve the communities of Trinidad and Tobago by increasing civic engagement and participation in finding solutions to problems that affect the most vulnerable in our society. And finally, forging a culture of innovation and entrepreneurship to encourage and to enhance employability. So there are a number of areas that we believe that the NTA can impact significantly on. It must impact significantly on for the people of Trinidad and Tobago, and this board is taking that challenge up, and in collaboration with our stakeholders, we ensure that we will make that a reality for Trinidad and Tobago.
Thank you so very much. I take this to be your closing statement as well.
As well.
I would ask the chairman, the CEO rather, as we bring these proceedings to a close, because we have some other meetings that have to proceed subsequent to ours. Would you want to just give us some brief closing remarks before we bring our overall proceedings to a close?
Just to clarify certain things, Honourable Chairman, this whole scenario with the audited financial statements is something that I would have worked on actively from the moment I got into the company, and it speaks to institutional weakness basically across our system. We, at the time, I would have met a situation where 3 outstanding financial periods had not been audited. We actively engaged the auditor at the time to close that.
What I would like to suggest is that, please, if you can provide us whatever areas that may have been advanced,
yes,
that you would like to clarify. We have to wrap up now. So what I would like to suggest is if you could give a tight closing statement, and you are given the right to submit in writing,
yes,
to this committee, to the secretary,
the areas for clarity,
any areas that you would like to further clarify, sure, and you can put that in writing. But for this period, we would like you to just give us a kind of crisp closing statement.
And essentially, it's to say that I have heard the comments of members, and they have expressed a lot of concern. And I want to say that in a lot of the areas that they did express concern, it was areas that we as a management team at the NTA did find concern as well. And essentially to say to the listening public as well as yourselves that a lot of what was discussed here have been brought to closure. These things are no longer the scenario. I would also like to add that we will be providing the details with regards to the audited financial statements situation. Again, we would have provided it. We would have shown that every effort was made by the NTA to have those audited financial statements, produced for the periods that were under question. And of particular note, we would also like to put on record that we would have been submitting financial information to both the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Finance periodically, detailing all of the things that we would have discussed. And with those remarks, Honorable Chairman, I would bring my contribution to that.
All right. Well, may I, on behalf of the Public Accounts Enterprises Committee, indicate that there are several questions arising, particularly of contributions made by our colleagues here, that we would be submitting to the chairman and to the CEO.
Yes.
Because I want to make it very clear, we are here to help. We are here to assist. We are here to try to make this agency more efficient, more effective, and more economical in its overall operations. We are here to ensure that the mandate that you have been given is executed properly and efficiently in the interest of the people of the Republic of TNT. So I would like, on behalf of the committee, to expressly thank officials from the Ministry of Finance, Investments Division for being here, the Ministry of Education, led by the Permanent Secretary, and the team from the NTA, led by the Chairman, and your good self, the CEO. We are very happy that we were able to have some very frank and open discussions, because at the end of the day, we want to ensure that we get value for our dollar. We want to ensure that when Parliament approves money to any agency, the monies are spent in accordance with well-established regulations and provisions of the law. That is what we are concerned about. And we do not want to have any activities that are contrary to the laws and regulations governing the financial affairs of our country. So that is the purpose that we are here. So once again, we want to thank everyone for being here. At this time, at this moment, we suspend these proceedings. Thank you very much.